let me tell you a little bit about my first serious band, Canal Street. It only lasted a couple of years while I was in college, so early 90s. Our live sets were about a third originals and two-thirds covers. We played quite a bit during those 2 years, plus we provided hours of entertainment to the FSU college kids who really got a kick out of tearing the first C off of our posters. During that time, we were in the Florida Flambeau, the local arts and entertainment paper, a few times. And we were even on FSU's radio station V89 a few times. However, we only got our picture in Tallahassee's main newspaper, the Democrat, twice. The first time was for the release of our album. Well, okay, our cassette. We couldn't afford to press LPs or CDs. It was called No Passing, and after ordering a batch of cassettes, we printed, cut, folded, and stuffed the liner notes inserts into the cases ourselves. Final Fever even carried a couple. A friend of mine burned it to CD a few years back. I still have that CD, but I doubt I have any of the cassettes anywhere. Anyway, the second time our picture was used in the Tallahassee Democrat, well, that was interesting. See, there was an article describing this new music and culture trend called grunge. And as an illustration of grunge, they used our picture. Which is absolutely hilarious because if you came to see us live, what you would hear would be things like Billy Joel's Scenes from an Italian Restaurant, or Frank Zappa's Peaches and Regalia, or the Grateful Dead's Truckin'. The closest thing we had to grunge in our set was Radar Love by Golden Earring. Well, I say it was hilarious, but at the time I didn't find it hilarious at all. In fact, it ticked me off. Hey, just because we wear flannel and have long hair that obscures our faces and posed for our band picture out in an outdoor setting in a casual pose, that doesn't mean our music is this amateurish, teenage, angsty, mumbling garage sameness. For you newer viewers to this channel, please bear in mind that during this time in my life, my music snobbery was nothing short of breathtaking. Please continue me from 1991. So no, I'm not interested in Smells Like Teen Spirit. I'm not interested in Rusty Cage. I'm not interested in Say Hello to Heaven. And honestly, just going by how many times I've heard how good-looking Eddie Vedder is, I sure as hell am not interested in anything on 10. So yeah, from the word go, it's fair to say I had a chip on my shoulder about everything grunge. I pretty much avoided it completely. The thing that started to turn me around was the video to Black Hole Sun. I thought I was awesome, and the guitar solo sounded like Frank Zappa. Eventually, I got into the entire Super Unknown album. And while I'm still not a fan of the music of Nirvana, I now acknowledge that their impact was enormous, their hearts were in the right place, definitely, and all three of them are deserving of an awful lot of respect. Plus, I married someone who was hugely influenced by Nirvana, and as a result, I'm now very familiar with not only Nevermind, but also Bleach and In Utero, MTV Unplugged, basically all their albums. And while I suppose, for a further exploration of grunge as a genre, I could have gone with Temple of the Dog or Alice in Chains, but it seems to me that a better representation of the early days of grunge would be Pearl Jam's 10, one of the founding albums of the genre. So let's see how this music sits with me now, 30 years later. Listening to this album all the way through the first time, I was surprised by how many songs I recognized. Even Flow, Alive, Black, and Jeremy, well, they all registered in there somewhere, though I'm not sure I could have identified them out of context as being by Pearl Jam. Especially Alive and Jeremy, I think I would have acknowledged that I'd heard them before, but just categorized them as generic 90s rock songs, numbers 12 and 35. Other things I'm noticing. The guitar line behind the verses in Once sounds to me as if they're lifted right from Jeff Beck's Scatterbrain. And while I'm on the subject of guitar, closer listening is bringing to light some interesting details. For starters, I'm not hearing a heavy reliance on typical bridge position humbucker stuff like you usually hear in harder rock tunes. In fact, I'm hearing the solos relying on the neck pickup, which is definitely more of a classic rock move. I'm also hearing phaser and wah, both cocked and swept, used to produce some very Hendrix-like tones. Starting off with bridge position, typical kind of harder rock sound. Neck position, more of a classic rock sound. With phaser. With phaser and with a cocked wah. With phaser and with a swept wah. And in terms of the solos, I go back and forth. Some of these solos make me think, man, that's exactly what I would have done. And others make me think, man, that's kind of amateurish. When you think about it, though, I guess that says more about me than it does about Gossard and McCready. Other music things. I am glad I listened to both the original release and the Brendan O'Brien mixes on the 10 Redux album. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had a feel for the bass at all. It's a solid performance, but the O'Brien mix brings it up just enough that you can hear the sound Jeff Ament is getting, and it's pretty killer. Another thing, I find it interesting that they put both the songs Deep and Release next to each other at the end of the album, given that they're both in 6/8 time while the rest of the album is very squarely 4/4. Oh yeah, and at the end of Release we get the Secret song, which seems to be a 5-minute instrumental homage to the first half of Phil Collins's In the Air Tonight, the bit before the drums. Let's see, anything I'm missing? No. Oh, all right. I suppose I can't avoid it any longer. I need to talk about Eddie Vedder. Had to happen sooner or later. Something silly to start with. Can someone explain to me why it was so trendy at the time to make most vowels sound like they had an umlaut over them? I, me, meh, class, class, clay, clay. But as for Eddie Vedder's contributions to this album, well, I did find a lot of things to like. There's no denying the emotion in his delivery of Once, Black, and Deep, for example. There are also plenty of examples of strong technical ability. Many, many examples of notes held solid for many measures. Some of the lyric content is moving, some is disturbing, and in one case it's even Oedipal. You don't see that very often. The problem I have is for just about every positive point I can cite, there's a balancing negative one. As strong as the vocals are on Once and Black, there are counterexamples of self-indulgent kind of mumblings like in Oceans and Garden. And for every sustained note that he nails, there's a sustained note that's flat by about 15 cents. And as moving and disturbing as some of the imagery is on this album, there are also songs that are complete teenage boy angst word salad. I will walk with my hands bound. I will walk with my face blood. I will walk with my shadow flag into your garden, garden of stone. You do that. But as much as some of this album just strikes me as, shut up, Mom, you just don't understand me, I think there's enough in the performances to make this album interesting overall. I'm going to listen to this for a week or so and see how it goes. Sorry, I meant see how it goes. You know the song America by Simon & Garfunkel? It's one of my favorites of all time. It absolutely kills me dead. It came up on a playlist once while I was driving Astrid to the mall, and by the time we parked the car, I was in tears. And what can be more embarrassing to a teenager than being seen by your friends at the mall next to your weeping dad in the mall parking lot? Anyway, there's something interesting about that song that not a lot of people realize. It's all in free verse. There's no rhyme scheme at all. None. Check it out for yourself. I mean, when I first discovered this about that song, it blew my mind. It's something that you take so for granted when it comes to lyric structure that when it's absent, it's kind of mind-blowing. And here's the thing I noticed about 10. The entire album is free verse. Well, unless you count the chorus of Black, which rhymes the word everything with the word everything. An entire album in free verse is certainly not something I expected. And I have to say, I respect that choice. It works well in this context. And that seems to be the magic word for this album. Context. There are a few genuinely powerful musical moments in these songs. There are interesting choices in form. There are a few very memorable riffs. The band is tight. Even on that last song, Release, in which the entire song was pretty much improvised, including the lyrics, it's apparent that these are musicians that are in tune with each other and know how to communicate. And the songwriting is, well, when it's dealing honestly with his relationship with his father, his mom, and even his surfboard, I believe it. But when he switches over to teenage button-pushing songs about teenage suicide, don't do it! Or songs where he relates drug use to rape and murder, or just the jumbled teenage mess that happens in Garden, that stuff seems a lot more trite. I mean, if I was, let's just say, undergoing glandular beta testing in 1991, this might have been my favorite album ever. And had I discovered Pearl Jam in that context, I can see how powerful 10 might have been to me. But that's not where I'm at anymore. Turns out Teenage Angst goes from the most important thing ever to laughably dismissible by the time you're 50. And in a broader sense, this brings to light that I keep coming up against something as I'm going through these albums. That some of these might not be 100% great, but they would have been 100% great given the right context. So the best I can say for 10 is there are great moments, but it's not for me. But that doesn't mean it's not for anyone. If you dig it, I dig. I won't think less of you for it. And I do got some Soundgarden coming up in a few weeks. Let's see how that one pans out.